And good evening, everybody. I'm John O'Loughlin. Welcome to my channel. It's called McDuff Lives, and it's Wednesday night with Mark. And so, welcome, Mark Kulacz. How are you doing tonight, man?
Doing great, John. Another busy couple of weeks to catch up on. Uh, thanks again for having me on your program regularly. It's good to be here. Um, what's new on your end?
Well, I finished reading Rulers of Evil. I didn't read all the chapters, but I wrapped it up. I haven't started a new book yet. What I'm doing is I am slowly drinking in the new book by H.P. Albarelli called A Coup in Dallas, which has a lot of stuff that historically ties together uh, the synarchist movement that I've been studying uh, going back into the 30s in France and Italy uh, with the Kennedy assassination. And you may have heard of some of the French names involved, and the idea that the OAS, the French generals that tried to pull a coup on de Gaulle, were involved. Well, this is a much more in depth, and I think I'm taking it a little bit at a time. So then when I'm ready, I'm going to do a series on that book because I think it's very, very important, not only to just tie this whole Seneca thing together, which I think is really what the big blob is right now, Mark. We say, what's the deep state? What's the blob? Well, I think it has a lot to do with that same thing of this business oriented behind the scenes cabal that's always wanting to just seize more and more control, no matter whether it's Democrat, Republican, doesn't matter. Just how do I get more power? And it seems to be just raging out of control at this moment in so many ways. Well, that's my opinion. That's what I've been working on, and I know you've been working hard. And let me take a minute to say thank you for all your work. You you actually were up most of the night
Oh yeah.
uh, after a couple of YouTube problems just to record with the show with your comments and with the chat the Senator Johnson hearings, and that's dedication, man, and I applaud you for it.
Well, thank you. Watch-alongs are actually fairly easy programs, even if we're staying up late, because you can turn the camera off. You don't have to be engaged. You can actually talk with the audience, which is great. That was we're going to talk a little bit about that event. But this January has not been too exhausting with respect to new research. I've done a few shows, a few watch-alongs, but because of the censorship on the YouTube, I've invested a lot of time into working on the archives and working on lists and making playlists for material, and that has taken a considerable quantity of time. But I think it's going to improve the experience, and it needs to be done because of the way I need to distribute up all the videos. I know it's not user friendly, but it's a step in the right direction. But the hard work before that it was a 4.5 hour hearing with Senator Ron Johnson of Wisconsin. The hard work was really the hundreds of hours before that, if not thousands, digging into all of those topics, so that when you're just watching it, you're just bringing up stuff that we've already dug into, and then putting pieces together. And great audience, they brought new stuff as well. So that those are actually easy. I really enjoy just being in that particular mode. Now that event itself, that 4.5 hour hearing, you can imagine that there's more than a few people that will never want to watch the thing, or they watch it and they just with the intent to debunk things one after the other. Um, the different people had different expectations, I believe. Some of the comments, not just on my channel, but overall, were that there was a little disappointment that they didn't get into things like origin. But what I really appreciated about that event, and maybe this was Ron Johnson's planning or not, was that they just focus on the therapies, the response and the therapies, and what was available, and how they were, figuring things out on the fly. I absolutely loved that hearing. Um, Almost, you would be, aside from Johnson, you would be hard pressed to guess who was a Democrat and who was a Republican. I loved that. I felt like the spirit of being with people, like in a good hard work meeting. They were bringing it. They didn't agree on everything, but they just wanted to come up with solutions and bounce ideas off each other, invent that they couldn't get to do their work the way they wanted to do. They were really doctors, real doctors working for the most part. Some don't have too many patients that they work with, but they have combined hundreds of thousands of individual patients that they've worked with for many, many years. And it's their job not to promote this or that medicine or this or that therapy. I'm sure they all have some biases and different things that they prefer to do, but they were real doctors. Okay. And you could tell quite a few of them, they weren't faking the tears when they were getting upset about losing people because they couldn't practice the medicine, health the way that they wanted to. And it really highlighted a tragic problem that we have now, John, where then this really wasn't clear until that hearing. The 40-plus year lead of the National Institutes of Allergies and Infectious Diseases, Dr. Fauci, did a little bit of work, did a little bit of surgical work when he was younger, but for the most part, he is a politician. He is into the into really the study of genetics, which is behind a lot of the research and cancer research behind the HIV research, which has been going on since the early 1980s. And then I realized that his boss, Francis Collins, who every once in a while had given me something hopeful to think about, but overall, I don't know. I think he gets an F. Is a geneticist. And then I was thinking, Rochelle Walensky, well, yeah, she's got an MD. She's practiced a little bit, but she went to Johns Hopkins, and it was really more along the line of the bench sciences as opposed to working with people. And then I just started really going up and down the list. And between the FDA and the CDC and the NIH and all of these other institutions and experts that were being brought in, I'm like, gosh darn it, almost none of these people have patients. Almost none of them. And they're making, they show all their charts and we need to use this therapy and they tell you the leadership of the country, they're talking with the press about the policy should be. And at some point, all of our health institutes and the medicine verification, everything wound up coming under control of scientists who are not actually regularly practicing healthcare. And they're put on the cover of Time magazine, and they are, and what's been done through the academic institutions is it's been pushed on all of our young population that's going into schools to become doctors, that these are the doctors that they should be aspiring to be like. When in reality, there's this is not the best word to use, but there's a bit of a blue collar, roll up your sleeves, get the work done mentality that most of those doctors had there. And, they make mistakes and they're learning things on the fly. But that it was so apparent there. And maybe that wasn't Johnson's intent. And the one person that stood out like a sore thumb was Robert Malone. That was truly more enlightening, more embarrassment for him, I think. Overall, the hearing actually inspires me. It made me, allowed me, and hopefully allows other people to really see this separation. That there are a lot of really well-meaning, hard-working people in healthcare, And though it may not lead to initial political solution, like there's going to be a vote on something, I now have direction, right? And clarity. I think more clarity on the problem and know where to be moving towards. Anyways, I'm really appreciative of that. I hope more people see it. Maybe that's not everyone's takeaway. They want to see, this person good, that person bad, etc. To me, it didn't really, aside from the embarrassment of Malone, it didn't really come down to any one particular person. It just highlighted a much bigger problem. Big, big, big problem.
What is that big problem?
Well, the bigger problem is all of our healthcare is right now being run by non-practicing scientists, and scientists, and at one point scientists stopped becoming people who are correlated with the scientific method. They're just diplomats ish, with an agenda to push forward this continued investment into genetic research. Now, I think most fields, like let's say the Department of Transportation was run by people who were I don't know, civil engineers, and let's say architects, or people who were a bit pie in the sky but didn't have a lot of work, like let's say at the civil engineering level of a city, right? So that difference does happen, but I think usually there's checks and balances, right? So people tend to go back and forth between the two jobs, and they benefit from that cross pollination. Because if there's too much idealism at the top, nothing ever happens. So usually there's a correctioning or a feedback loop, so these things get balanced. Unfortunately, this is my hypothesis still, John, is that the appetite for genetic research is so insatiable that it has allowed a runaway train of administration and financial investment in the health sciences that is not actually glued to any particular results. There is no end to the money in justification for HIV research, for cancer research, for all of this new era of DNA and RNA medicine. There's no end to it. There's always an excuse because there's so much desire to dig into that stuff, and I think it comes all the way from the top of all of our banks, and there's a lot of people at the very top who would like to see some science evolve that would give their kids an extra 20, 30, 50 years of life, or whatever to that extent. So the health institutions right now, I think, are in a really bad shape. They need to get real doctors. I don't mean just a doctor like a PhD, but people doing real practice in large numbers at very high level of these institutes. I think it would go a long way. They should be on the cover of I don't like Time magazine at all, but it should be shown in outlets like that here's some real doctors, right, who are trying to figure out how to use real therapies to deal with an awful situation. And most of them, if they had some freedom to practice as they should, and they call it practice for a reason, because you're always trying to figure things out, that they would have been far more successful. I will eventually find ways to summarize what I just said more succinctly, but it really wasn't until that hearing that it just hit me over the head. And when I started digging into Walensky, I'm like, wow, yeah, she's not really a doctor. She's not really a practicing doctor either. I think her husband is, which is surprising. I think her husband treats a lot of children at Mass General Hospital, and that was one of the reasons why I've been hoping for things to pull through with Walensky. Democrat, Republican, I don't care anymore. I just want someone to make some good freaking decisions. But it just hasn't been good. They just keep doubling down on whatever their decisions are. Yeah. And the other thing was the nonpartisanship. You can't tell who was a Democrat there, who was a Republican. The only person that even mentioned it, aside from, of course, Ron Johnson, who's a Republican senator, was Robert Malone. it was so awkward. Said, well, I used to be a Democrat and I voted for Obama, but now I guess I'm a Republican because, and it just was unnecessary. Like, who cares? Who? It doesn't matter in that case. They should have been talking therapies, what works. Many mentioned the need to use anti-inflammatories, how important that was when you're having that type of respiratory swelling. No one mentioned it. To be honest, I haven't heard many people mention that either. And you could just tell thousands of lives have been saved by the proper use of anti-inflammatories. Real pragmatic discussion. You didn't get any of that in all of those hearings that they had in DC with Fauci and all those press conferences. It was just, well, nothing works. I guess it's gene therapy or remdesivir. And that was it. That was the end of it. That's horrible. It was almost a glee that there were people dying to justify the use of the new medicines. That's horrible, John.
I didn't see the hearings, so
You saw them with Fauci and Deborah Birx and
yeah.
others
But
with Trump during the Trump administration, the last days of the Trump administration.
no, but
Things were melting down. I'm sure you've seen a few in passing, maybe.
oh yeah, I'm talking about the ones that you are referring to as
Oh,
the good doctors, the ones that you saw on Senator Johnson's hearing.
yeah.
Let's go through some of your favorite. What were the moments of the hearing that you would call the most memorable?
That's a great question. There was a nurse from New York City at the end, in the last 12 minutes, who recounted how she told two stories. She ultimately had lost her job because she didn't have the right ideas, I guess. And by that it means that her priority was making people comfortable and saving lives versus sticking to the particular doctrine that was coming down from the top. That's it. That is not tolerable. So she had two stories. One was that her own son had a serious heart issue after one of the therapies, and the doctors just didn't take her seriously. They said that it was impossible for there to be any connection. Again, it always goes to, you're just an upset woman. You're just dealing with stress. They'll blame it on this, that, the other thing, anything. They'll blame it on, someone's child years, except the obvious connection of, you know what? It was just 24 years ago. My son took this and now he's having that. Shouldn't that be at the top of the list of things to look at? Maybe it's not related, but you know what? If you see someone bleeding in the road with a broken leg and you see a car with a bloody bumper next to it, you should assume they're related. Maybe they're not. Probably are. And she also talked about how, she's noticed a pattern of taking patients who were that had not received the therapy, who are in the hospital sick, being deprived of food, being deprived of bathing, and being encouraged to take remdesivir, and as soon as they felt the need, get on a vent, which is basically a death sentence. And that story resonated with me because my friend Marie, a senior woman in New Hampshire, that's exactly what happened to her. And if it wasn't for the fact that she watched shows like mine and other great people that I've been able to meet, and she knew that that they were going to try to kill her, she'd be dead by now. I have no doubt. This is not an isolated story. She went into the hospital sick. They, no food, no shower, 4 days, remdesivir, and the doctors just kept coming by saying, "You want a vent? Want a ventilator?" And she knew what was going on. She was cut off by the phone. She started drinking a lot more water and basically realized that she needed to save her own life. Fortunately, she had a daughter that was a little bit hip to the current state of affairs, was able to get in touch with the right people at the hospital to get her on a different floor. And well, now she's alive to tell that story. And I had an interview with her about a month or so ago. And that story is as amazing of and horrifying a story as it is, John. It's actually only like 1 in 100,000. That story happens a lot. There really is a plan to treat people differently based upon therapy status when they go into hospitals. And if the certain criteria is met, they won't leave the hospital. And the hospital will get $20,000, $50,000, whatever it is, bonus because of that. And of course, you get the statistics that you want. This is how bad things are. We have a healthcare system that's run by diplomats with people who spend more time with the International Monetary Fund than sick patients, by scientists, by geneticists, instead of real practicing healthcare professionals. It's really bad, John. I don't mean to sound extreme. No, I do mean to sound extreme because it is extreme. It really is that bad. You
I,
should be shocked.
I am shocked, but I'm not shocked. But I am proud of you for saying it, and it has to be said. I observe this insanity, and I feel powerless. But we're not powerless as long as we have courage, and I do appreciate that very much. This is a um, a problem that I want to help. I want to help solve. That's why I bring it up with someone who really I don't think understands our point of view at all, such as I spoke to yesterday on my show from the LaRouche organization, and I respect those people deeply, but I am afraid that they haven't got an open mind when we try to discuss this stuff with them. So, but I'm not willing to give up. So what I want to do is, if not with them, then there's other people that maybe we can influence. That's why I want to seize upon what we're calling the good docs tonight, and maybe name some names so that I could say, well, here's one that I think you should listen to.
There's I think it's Pierre Corey. There was a Peter McCullough. Oh my goodness, I wish I had the full list in front of me. There was a Dr. Parks, who was a black female doctor who talked about how her hands have been tied so much, and she said that her own dad just died. Her own father died like 5 or 6 days before that hearing in the hospital, not getting the right therapies. And even with her experience, she wasn't able to make an impact on that. Now, none of us should want there to be a situation where any demographic, whatever it doesn't have access or is being disproportionately impacted by some new disease or condition or food or whatever the case may be. But I didn't know that the adverse reactions to the therapies were actually much higher in the African American community. I didn't know that.
Mm.
Now, first of all, it shouldn't be higher in any community. Okay, don't I'm not really I don't. I just want equal opportunity for everyone. Okay.
You don't think
But
that they've aimed this stuff at particularly,
I don't think so.
characteristics, of people with dark skin or light skin
It
or
may have been known. It may have been known, but I don't know. I can't say. I know that many talked about the impact of supplements. They talked about the impact of vitamin D, how which many people have been deprived of because they were locked up for their own safety. How many of these things were just catastrophically bad decisions and how many were intentional. I would like to think that it was just a horrible mistake. I don't think it is, though. Was it all planned and to be malicious? I don't know if all of it was, but the net result is terrible. Another doctor, I forget, I don't know if this was Corey and I should have wrote the names down. There were some there I'd not seen before, who talked
We're
about
getting
how
him in the chat. How about Dr. Paul Merrick, Marik?
Merrick was excellent. He
Yeah.
was excellent. Thank you for mentioning that in the chat. He was excellent. And I think it was actually Merrick who might have brought up the fact that the remdesivir, most of the testing on it has been biased and cooked, that it's actually shown to increase death overall versus not receiving anything. And the cost is, I think, is about $3,000 versus something else, which I won't even say the name of, which has been proven to be, I think, 26 times more effective and only costs about 2 cents a pill. Like, I wouldn't, I mean, of course, I need to verify the data myself, right? I'm sure maybe there's a little bit of a bend to that as well. Nonetheless, I have a lot of anecdotal data from people in the Lyme community or so on that backs up that some of these therapies have been extremely successful. The more traditional ones using low-hanging fruit, available medicine,
And early treatment.
early treatment.
Yeah.
Early treatment matters, but later treatment is not to be seen as a death sentence unless someone has a lot of health problems to begin with, in which case it can become complicated to say, exactly what the biggest issue is. But for most people in good health, receiving the right therapies seem to it be almost 100% rate of being able to survive it.
I think it's worth just putting in for our friends at YouTube that neither you nor I are offering any medical advice. We're just reporting what other doctors have said on the Senate hearing, and
Yeah,
that's just for First Amendment.
it's a tough subject. It's a tough
So,
subject.
I don't mind, uh, being censored, but if only if it's fair. So we're just talking about what doctors are saying.
Yeah, they're
We're not
probably
giving
all wrong.
that reminds me of the other point I was going to make was here in where I live in Maryland. It's just things are decided basically by county, and our county is decide no, it's the state that has decided that no, it's the county. That's what it is. Anyway, the thing is, nobody has to have a jab except for healthcare workers. So what they're saying is exactly what you're saying, that the government trusts everybody to make healthcare decisions except for healthcare workers.
That's one
You
way of
can decide for
looking at it.
yourself unless you are a professional in the healthcare field, in which case you have to defer to authority.
Which is it has been suggested. Actually, there's a lot of evidence behind this that the jab does not stop transmission at all, and that the natural immunity is superior. So, if those are the case, why should healthcare workers make any compromises unless your hope is to take healthcare workers that are a little bit more skeptical and get them out? You need those people out. Anyone that's going to take an on-job person in the hospital and give them a program that might help them leave, you don't want those people at the hospital anymore. You want them out. Because that's just not the direction you want to be going in. If you know what I'm trying to say. And that's awful. That is awful. Uh, and this, they must know this. It must be intentional. There's a lot of common ground here, John. Most people don't want to be sick, and most people don't want to die. So, given that fact, right? Um, if it were the case that there was something in the world that's causing a lot of tragedy, and the only known way to prevent it is some new therapy, even if it's risky. Most people don't want to get sick. Most people don't want to die, and they'll take the risk. So can't we just rely on that as like a nice common ground for people to make decisions based
No,
upon what is the
we have
common interest?
we have to redefine the word pandemic, to fit our fact pattern so that we can then convince everybody that, yeah, even though you don't see, bodies in the streets, that there really is one. Because we redefined it, through through some kind of a rule that we changed, that now it's different, now you only have to be a little bit sick to call it a
Well, there's
pandemic.
that, and
I'm
there's the whole,
paraphrasing. Yeah.
this this focus on emerging diseases and novel pathogens. Being able to say, hey, we found this pathogen, and it's novel. It's so novel. It's so different from anything we've ever seen before. Therefore, every existing therapy that is out there um, is no longer seen as a viable alternative to helping that novel thing. You basically, what they're trying to say is that, look, we found a coronavirus, and it's so novel, it's so unique that you should take all, I don't know what the number is, I'm just going to make up something, right? 10,000 other medicines developed in history and view every single one of them as rat poison now, because it's novel. It's so different.
Yeah.
Everything should be seen as death, unless we can come up with something new and amazing, which we know what that is. And and when this whole thing started, going back to China, who knows where the origins really were. But I want to give you a shout out, some praise, John, for your Harley Schlanger interview. Now he lives in Germany, right? Or resides in Germany now.
Yeah, Potsdam, which is outside of Berlin.
So I know that there's some differences on how I think we're seeing the risks in the USA. Maybe it's different in Germany right now, but that's fine. That's fine. Disagreement's good. Healthy disagreement, talking it out is good. But he mentioned something I found really interesting, and I've heard this before, but I never put it into the context of which I view things now. And that is that on September 17th, 18th, and 19th, there was a huge derivatives event involving tons of U.S. debt, federal debt or banking debt. And this issue, I think, was a very potentially perilous situation, much more than we knew about for the U.S., maybe for the U.S. dollar. And so this was what, in late September 2019, right around the same time that a bat and a pangolin went for a walk, and something new and novel and amazing was created. And whatever did happen in response to that derivatives event, it seemed to have worked out because, well, in a way, right? Because most people didn't lose their homes. A lot of people lost their jobs, but most people didn't. And I just can't help but wonder if maybe there was agreement made between banks, that dark hand, right? That said, you know what? Tell you what, we're going to let you cruise through this event. We're going to make sure you're not going to default. But under one condition, you have to subject your population to this medicine we've been wanting to try. And if you do that, we're good.
Pure speculation, sir.
Pure speculation, a
Pure
hypothesis.
speculation.
You saw that Carnegie photo from November of 2001 with the PBS NewsHour and Fauci and Bill Gates Sr., the geneticists, the head of the IMF and the World Bank was in that photo too. Then the head of the Carnegie Institute and Ted Turner, all the New Age love and light. We're going to redesign the human condition and whatever, merge with computers and explore the planets, people, all in one tight little photo, right? And that's still, I think, that those connections are still very much at play.
I think you're right, and I think that they are in various different facets representatives of the interests of this blob, or what I think is the synarchy, the
It's
the
a
deep
synagogue.
deep financial interests that come from the old noble families that never gave up their wealth, and the new wealth that came from the merchant trade, i.e., the China trade, i.e., the dope trade, and all of that money, that it just turns into these incredible fortunes, uh, dwarfs the power of your average, American immigrant who find, no matter what decade you came, whether it was, in the 1790s or the 1990s, you find yourself find where's the ladder, how do I start climbing the golden mountain? I want to be part of this, but you never get a chance because
Mm-hmm.
all of that big, big, big money is just too big to let anybody else in anymore, and that's why they're trying to manage us, and that's why I think, they come up with these kooky ideas like Fabian socialism, for Christ's sake, the idea that they can make better humans, by eliminating the part that's not so good, and of course the part that's not so good is the part that doesn't look exactly like them when they look in the mirror. It's
Oh, what
just
is the
they're
not so good
crazy.
part? Who knows what the not so good part is,
Yeah,
right?
well, one way to answer that would be John Foster Dulles, the famous Secretary of State for Eisenhower, who did so much horrible stuff around the world, while smiling and serving as the chairman of the World Council of Churches, for Christ's sake. And so there he is as U.S. State Department, and what his oh, I lost the train. What were we talking about?
Synarchism? Hmm.
Yeah, well, yeah, the idea that if you're not with us, you're against us. That all comes along with it. But anyway, I've got out on a limb and I forgot where I was.
It's okay. I think we all lose our track. It happens to me quite a bit too.
Let's get back to our interview yesterday, and thank you for the compliment. It's it. What do you say to someone who says, "Well, I've I've had the therapy. My family has had the therapy. I know a lot of people that have had the therapy. My doctor says it's safe, so I don't see a problem." Um, where can you open their mind to the fact that maybe their experience wasn't all that all that valuable as a rule? You know what I'm saying? How can we? Is there a wedge you can think of to open that mind?
Well, if they didn't have a problem, that's good. I'm glad they didn't have a problem. I don't want them. No, we don't want people to be sick or to get
No,
any
I mean,
more
but
illnesses.
people who are, that are influencers, that are people that you would like to drag into our little band of red pilled anarchists or whatever we are.
Well, I suppose it would depend upon the person that we're talking to with here, and if they are bringing, if that statement is being made to me to say, well, I didn't have a problem, so you should do it.
Yeah.
No, no, I, I am sitting in this chair right now, and I've taken possibly a permanent hiatus from what my career used to be. Who knows? Because of our battle with the U.S. healthcare system, for saying that anyone that thinks that chronic Lyme exists is crazy. It doesn't exist, and you just can't talk about it. And it was just one of those shocking things. And there's at least 1 to 200,000 people that have that. And then you're said, as matter of fact, they deny it even exists.
Mm-hmm.
But then you have to accept again that that this other thing does exist, and you have to take this medicine, and you can't ask any questions. And then if you mention the current drug epidemic or the opioid epidemic, you're basically what? Now you're what? A white nationalist? If you mention that, or right winger, or this, or who knows what? Very.
Why can't we talk about the opium epidemic? Why can't we talk about the horrible fentanyl problem?
I
What?
talk about it, but you don't hear it mentioned on the news. I did
Yeah.
a little math experiment on a show where, first of all, the average. This is just one of those things to talk about how misprioritized our response is. Right now, if you, the average age of someone who's passed from COVID is actually higher than the average life expectancy now in the United States.
Mm.
It's you could almost jokingly say that if someone told you you're going to die of COVID, you could say, well, that's good news, because that means you're going to live a longer than average life.
But Mark, if
I
you
mean,
take this therapy, you can travel, man. Don't you want to travel?
I think it will kill me.
Oh, you think it will kill you?
I think it might. Well, first off, we have our own particular health conditions here in my household.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want any of this untested medicine coming into this household, causing unknown problems. I have friends who have heart problems now. I just lost my aunt. My aunt just died like 2 weeks ago.
Sorry, man.
Even worse than that, you know what? I only got to meet her once in my life. You know why? Because my dad was out of my life at age 1 because of PTSD from that freaking war over in Asia. So it got this government now, breaking up my family. First off, I had a great stepdad. I don't feel like I lost any, like I'm traumatized or I have PTSD from it. But you know what? These are real impacts, John. And there's a whole wing of my family. I never got to meet my grandparents on that side of the family. Ever. They were long before I reconnected with my dad. I was in my late 30s. And then I have other people who I could have connected with. Oh, and that aunt, she had 3 kids. One of her kids died of an opioid overdose, supposedly, about 4 or 5 years ago. We have chronic illness in our household. From probably an escaped lab accident down on Plum Island. We have drug addictions in this house. We have all of this stuff. And now this government is coming along saying, you know what, you should drop everything and go off and fight in a war in another country to protect your freedoms. Screw them. Really. It's too much. I'm out at this point. It's really that crazy. So I don't think that these therapies. I have my own opinions, but at this point, I think it could be seriously fatal in this household, or at the very least cause permanent damage. And I'm not going to do it. And I tell you what, I feel so confident in that position that I'm going to sit here and wait until, you know what, no one's telling me to do it anymore. Here's the thing. Let's just say 4 or 5 years go by, right? Let's say 4 or 5 years go by, and it's proven that there is not a, a single risk associated with the therapy. Let's just say that the data is shown that the therapy is no riskier than me taking this pen cap and tapping it on my nose and putting it down. That's how bad the risk is to my life. In that case, you know what? I'll swallow my pride. Jab me up, man. Jab me up. I'm not doing this because of pride. I'm willing to take the inconvenience of not being able to travel. Probably there's other family now I won't be able to see again before they die. I have family now that won't talk to me because I'm making this decision because of all this nonsense that's coming down from the top. But I'm so convinced in my particular position that I'm just going to wait, no matter what the cost. And at the end of the day, if it comes down, if enough time passes and it realizes that there is no risk, jab me, fine. But that's how convinced I am right now of what the risks are, especially given the profile that I have to deal with. So that should really wake people up. and if someone has to because of a financial situation, I understand. And there's things you can do, and there's ways to be able to reduce the risk profile. I can give pointers to some people that might be able to help further with that because I'm not a health professional. I understand that. I know a lot of people have done it because they just have to. You know, you got kids in school or college, you have debt, you have a lawyer you need to pay. Horrible. You know, you don't want to lose your pension. There's no judgment here on people who've been made to compromise and make a decision that they didn't want to make.
I agree with that. And I don't think it's fair to judge other people on that either.
No.
I think it's old of it's important for those of us like you to speak out, and that's all. And I agree with you, and I feel the same way. I would not do it either, and for similar reasons. I mean, like I think the vulnerable, the pitch is that they need to protect the most vulnerable, right? I
Yeah.
think I think that, as I said on Twitter today,
Oh,
the best way to protect the most vulnerable is to protect them from the therapy.
uh,
Don't let them get it.
and there's parents eager to give it to children that are absolutely no risk. They are at zero risk.
But they watch
Why?
television. I mean, I think it's CNN, frankly.
And the opioid thing issue. I just want to go over this statistical thing. You can find Dr. Fauci multiple times saying that the pandemic was so bad that it resulted in a drop in U.S. life expectancy. That is a quote that has been repeated on almost every media outlet. I don't know, maybe even Fox for all we know. I try not to watch that either. Life expectancy decrease, biggest life expectancy decrease ever since the Spanish flu, and it's because of the pandemic. However, the life expectancy started to go down 2 years before the pandemic even started. And it is 100% correlated with the opioid epidemic and increases in suicide. 100%. There is such a level of psychopathic behavior right now with these scientists and geneticists running the NIH and NIAID that they will go out of their way to prevent people from talking about the opioid epidemic and then hijack those numbers to make the case that life expectancy is going down because of the coronavirus pandemic. Hence, they should take the therapies. It really is. This is as disgusting a thing as I've ever seen this government do. And then the numbers that I did in a video, we need our seniors, to be, in those old years, to be the inspiration, to share that knowledge with their younger families. So this isn't meant to sound cold, but if you look at the average age of people who pass from coronavirus, and then you start, you break it down by different age group, you compare it with the number of years that they might have lived optimistically, right? So you have people in their 80s and 70s and 60s. You multiply it by the number of people who have lived, or should they died in each of those age groups from coronavirus. And again, this is just with coronavirus, not even necessarily from coronavirus. You then factor in one generation. How many children would those people have had? Okay. And most of them, almost everyone, is over the age of 40 or 50 in this group. Then you start looking at the average age of death of the opioid epidemic, which is between 19 to 40. Factor in how many children they didn't have. And you come up with a number that there is, I think it's 25 times more years of American lives have lost from the opioid epidemic than the entire coronavirus pandemic. If you factor in a whole lost generation, that hundreds of thousands of children will never be born. The parents that died, the people that died early. It is a catastrophic thing on our impact on our demographics. And you can't talk about this. Now, there's a lot of things that have led to this. There's breakdowns in families. There's food. There's doctors who don't prescribe medicine right. There's children that are allowed to be fat and lazy. There's across the board. Okay, I'm not saying that there's one person causing this drug issue. I'm not. It's complicated. Many of us have failed. I've failed at it. Okay, but the point is that we can have almost free, some public awareness campaigns about it, getting rid of the shame, right? Maybe having more constructive ways, preventing people from crossing that line into getting into the really hard addiction. And you could save a lot of lives and help a lot of families. Instead, none of that happens. Congress goes into a fit every time someone asks for $1 million for that thing. You should have seen. Trump asked for like $20 million, which is like nothing. It's couch change for that. And people in Congress are like, oh, you can't do this. Waste of money. But you could throw what, $10 trillion at the coronavirus pandemic? And then they use the data to actually make the case that life expectancy is going down because of coronavirus. I don't have words, John. I do not have words for this level of disgust, the disgust I have for this behavior. It's not an innocent mistake. This is intentionally being done.
There's where I was going to say, is it possible, say, to get the AMA or some, this hierarchy of medical geniuses that seem to have policies for everything, to hold a big seminar, and they have a great big watch and they swing it back and forth over the people, and and all the doctors are like watching and they get hypnotized, and the speaker comes on and says, there's too many people in the world.
There's not too many people.
There's too many people in the world, doctors. I know you're going to see some bad things, but there's too many people. We have to accept there's too many people in the world, doctors. I can't come up with a better theory as to why they're getting along with this, Mark.
Well, you do touch on another horrifying conflict of interest, and that is, when did the banks get so involved in healthcare? Look, we all know that we have a big problem with underfunded liabilities, pensions which can't cover what they promised, decreasing birth rates. We have some real issues here. Social Security payments. How are we going to work all this stuff out? It's not going to be pretty. All right, but we can. But the first step is to just put it on the table and let's start talking about it. All right, how we're going to work this through. Right. Maybe more people need to have their parents live with them. There's who knows. We can work it out together as a society with some open conversation. But instead, it seems as though the World Bank and other big financial institutions could say, you know what, we can solve a lot of problems with those underfunded pensions, Social Security, if we can just get rid of a couple million people here and there.
Yeah.
Think of how much all the burden that would take off of the
I have no problem with the bankers going there, but I can't figure out how the doctors do it.
well the banks are deeply in bed with the medical institutions.
Yeah.
And the medical institutions put Fauci on the cover and not a doctor. They call him Dr. Fauci, but he doesn't have thousands of patients.
It's like Dr. Tedros, right?
I mean, how many parents did Fauci call and say, you know what, I'm sorry, but your child has a permanent heart injury right now, the medicine that we just approved.
Mm-hmm.
How many? Really, he's not doing that stuff. It's just policies from way up on high. They're completely detached from that. And then the doctors that are going through med school and training, right? They are told, look, the hero is Fauci. That's the hero. Don't look at this Dr. Merrick over here. He's an old fool. He believes in conspiracy theories.
Mm.
Yeah, I know he's complaining that that people have died and whatever, but he doesn't know what he's talking about. Listen to the geneticist.
Yeah. Peter Duesberg.
Peter Duesberg.
Yeah.
I don't know about him. I don't know.
Okay.
I know who he is.
He was the one that said, that AIDS is not really a virus or anything. It's just a combination of symptoms.
There's some truth to that. There is an HIV virus which does cause problems. However, would it have worked itself out naturally if we didn't keep experimenting with it and possibly even re-entering it into the blood supply?
Yeah.
It might have worked itself out. The risk with Duesberg is that he's so far into the it doesn't exist camp that it almost I'm not sure it actually helps the conversation at all. I think I knew what he was trying to say, and I think that he needs to be listened to, because there's actually there's a lot of pieces of truth to that, as opposed to Fauci's. It's just going to spread and cover the planet. There's nothing he can do to stop it.
Well, that's what President Biden said. He said everybody's going to get it this winter, right? And,
what, coronavirus?
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know if you've had a cold. I had a weird cold in December.
Mm.
I mean, a cold. Yeah, it's part of life. You get a cold once in a while. Boo hoo. But I felt really tired for a couple of days, and I don't like to feel that tired. Come on, man, there's stuff to do. So actually a little spooked for a day. Like, boy, I'm really exhausted. But you get over it. But that might have been this whole Omicron thing. I don't know. I'm not sure.
Yeah, other people I know have had that. It is a serious kind of flu-like condition that for some of my friends has lasted over 2 or 3 weeks. So yeah, and that's we got to keep our natural immune systems working.
Keep your natural immune systems. Your immune system is an amazing thing. It has evolved over millions of years. It has the ability to actually create immunity against things which don't even exist on the planet when you're born. That is how amazing your immune system is. But you do have to take care of it. You have to give it a little bit of TLC and love.
Mark, thanks for the TLC tonight.
You're welcome. Thank you. Thank you for
Yeah.
the great interviews. Really enjoyed it. And we'll touch base in another 2 weeks, maybe. Hopefully.
Oh, absolutely. I look forward to it, and we'll keep in touch offline as well. Thank you again, and I'm watching all your stuff now. I can't wait for the next one.
Thank you very
Housatonic
much.
Live, folks, and don't forget to support Mark on his Patreon. You can find the Patreon button at Housatonic Live.